Well, Neri, I'm so excited to sit down with you. I've been looking forward to chatting to you today about this topic of uncertainty and doubt because I think it's an important one for us to be talking about as Christians and as brothers and sisters in Christ as we're journeying together. But before we dive into that, which is a little uncomfortable and probably maybe a bit vulnerable, can you share with people who you are? Because you write for our devotional, but there is so much more to you than just writing for our devotional. And I love what you do on a day job and all the other things that you do. So can you share about that?
Yeah, I do. I do a few things. So yeah, I write for Hope Devotional. I've written a couple of books, and I enjoy doing that. But that's really just a side hustle and a hobby. I'd like to think that my real job is being a business person, but that's also a little bit of a side hustle still. But I own an ethical business that manufactures clothing for corporates and uniforms and things like that are ethically made. And I also work for a not-for-profit that does design and innovation for the faith-based sector. So I do a few different things, which keeps each week a bit busy and a bit different. But yeah, that's how I spend my time.
I love that because it always, every time we talk, something's going on. But also
In a
having,
non-dramatic kind of way.
absolutely. But having known you, like if you're listening for the first time to this conversation, Neri and I have actually known each other, have been friends since we were 14,
14, yeah.
riding on a school bus.
I walked
Um,
up to you and I said, "Are you Abby?" Because I'd heard about you through my Bible study group, and you went, "Yeah." And then I think I said, "Can I sit here?" And you said, "Yeah." And then we were friends.
then we were friends, and we have been for over 20 years now, which
Yes.
is kind of crazy. So you're getting
Yes.
an insight into a friendship that has been drawn out and been through many ups and downs and walked
Oh,
through
yeah.
many seasons of life.
Yeah.
And we have had these hard conversations. That's what I think
Mm,
one of the things that I love about our chats is that these are actually chats that we have had over the
mm,
last 20 years of growing in our relationship with God, together in supporting one another as sisters in Christ.
mm.
Um, and doubt and uncertainty is something that I think as a Christian, when we hear those words, we're like, we shouldn't doubt and we shouldn't be
Yes.
uncertain.
I'm a bad
Um,
person if I question God.
yeah,
Mm,
but I think that if all of us really think about it
mm,
and think about our walk with Christ, there have been moments of doubt and uncertainty. Every single one of us has experienced.
mm.
Um, for you, when it comes to doubt and uncertainty, what are your initial thoughts when you hear those words as a Christian?
Uh, I think that uh, initially, probably my reaction would have been more, "Oh, they're bad things. Not allowed to think that. Not allowed to feel that." But I feel like over the years, certainly in throughout the journey of my 30s, they have become friends. Is the word I
Mm,
want to use. They're not feelings that make me feel bad anymore. They're actually, if anything, shows me that I have a real active and alive faith in God, because I will doubt and I will be uncertain. And that shows me that this faith that I have is actually alive, because if it wasn't alive, then God would just be this thing that was
mm,
there, and that's fine, whatever. And I would never question him or never question the existence of him, or any of his work, and all of that kind of stuff. So they're actually now, for me, indicators of a live and active faith rather than a static one that doesn't question God.
That's actually a really interesting perspective that I hadn't thought of, but I think that it's so true. And as you were talking, I was like, yeah, you look at the Bible and you look at David and you look at Moses and you look at all of these key characters of the Bible, these key heroes of the faith, and all of them doubted.
Mm,
All of them wrestled with God and questioned him
mm,
about things that he had asked. All of them asked, God, are you there? Can you
Yeah.
hear me? Um, and so it's reflected in the Bible, but I think you're right. It's representative of a living and active faith, a faith that is developing, that is growing, that is changing, and getting to know God better.
Mm. We think about any sort of relationship, right? Like we put it in really basic human terms. The relationships that are, I want to say going nowhere, but just that kind of real, you're in a rhythm and all you do is the same thing every day. It's the same conversation. It's nothing changes, or you're not investing anything
Mm.
into the relationship. There's no seeking to understand the other person anymore because it's been X amount of years and you think you know everything about them, but in actual fact you don't. Like that's how we can approach our faith with God. And
Mm.
for me, that yeah, the uncertainty and doubt is that, well, this is a dynamic relationship with God because I don't know everything about him. So my doubting and my uncertainty that I might feel towards him causes me to actually rush towards him and seek to
Mm.
understand rather than just accept the status quo and be like a Sunday Christian where I just rock up, I throw some
Yeah.
money in the offering bowl, if they even do that these days. I throw some money via the app or the QR code on the screen, and then I show up for an hour and a half, and then I go home, and that's all that my faith is. Which
Yeah.
there will be no uncertainty and doubt in that if there is no active pursuit of God and leaning into those moments where things don't make sense, but through understanding Jesus, we can find a level of peace in
Yeah.
that doubt and uncertainty.
Yeah. Actually really love that in the doubt and uncertainty, we're running towards God because we're wanting, and I guess it's from a place of curiosity as well, and from a place of, well, God, like, show
Mm,
me, teach me, um, teach this heart, show me who you are in these moments. But
mm,
also, I want to ask questions and I want to be curious because that's how we learn, right? And that's how we
yeah,
grow.
yeah,
And faith is not supposed to be stale
no,
and stagnant. And as you said, it's supposed to be living and active.
mm,
And I guess doubt comes along with that. It's inevitable in our walk with Christ. But when we do have moments of doubt, it can be super unsettling and
mm,
can actually shake the foundations of the faith which we have.
mm,
For you, what has been your experience with doubt? You mention it in the devotional. You talk about a moment on a train.
mm.
Um, can you unpack your experience with doubt?
Yeah. So that moment on the train, I had whilst I sat down to write the devotionals for Hope. So that was a very like in the moment. This kind of that little revelation was in that moment. And I was on my way up to see my boyfriend. I was catching the train up, which is about an hour and a half out of Sydney. And I got on the train, and at a station that I got on at very regularly about 7, 8 years ago. And during that time, when I got on it very regularly, heading out to Macquarie Park where I was working, my boyfriend at that time had broken up with me. And every day I would get on the train and just feel this deep sadness. It really rocked my world and really called into question who I thought God was and why would he allow such pain? What was the point of it all? And every day I sat, and those questions were just what I would wrestle with on my way to work and from work. So I got really familiar with those surroundings. The footbridge that I talk about is an actual footbridge. It's those moments in that are actual real moments. The backyards I would look into and feel a bit like a peeping Tom, that I could see everything in your backyard. Um, and as I was going on that journey in this most recent time, I realized that they felt like they were consistent and familiar. They felt like old friends, these views. And I was just reflecting on that. I'm going, well, yeah, they're familiar, but they're not actually what was consistent during that time.
Mm.
What was consistent was actually, and I couldn't have seen it at the time, but I was reflecting on the fact that God was showing up and he wasn't
Mm.
answering. those questions. He wasn't answering those doubts. He wasn't explaining anything, but
Mm.
he just sat with me while I aired those doubts and I brought them to him. And some days it was real messy and I was super angry, and other days it was defeated and I was just like, I got nothing for you, God. I just don't understand it. And just those were the questions that he would show up for every day. And there were no answers, except, funnily enough, sitting on that train, the most recent time going out to visit my now boyfriend, um, it was almost like I could see the answers, but they had taken
Mm.
almost 7 years to arrive in my life and be like, this is why, like, I had better for you than what you thought was the best for you at the time. Um, and I saw that time differently. All of a sudden, the doubts looked different.
Mm.
And it was just this moment of like, yeah, the shift in the lens of that time was not about the view that I saw from the train every morning, but it was about the God that showed up every morning with
Yeah.
me and sat with me and listened to me and, held me and cared for me during a time where I was very angry with him and very disappointed and disillusioned and, depressed and all of that over what I had experienced. So, yes, that's, I guess, the context and the story behind the devotional. I think what also is in key, just as what is key, sorry, based on what you were saying just before, bringing our questions to God and having them there, is to also not have an expectation for an answer.
Mm.
And I think that that's our problem. So we can have doubts, and that's fine. And we're encouraged to bring them to God. Good. That's very good. We can see that David did and all of that, like you said. But I think our challenge in an instant minded society is to expect an instant answer or an instant response to those doubts.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I love actually about the book of Job, and particularly the part at the end where, finally God shows up. All his friends have, they're questioning him, and they're like, Job himself is questioning God, all that kind of stuff. And he gets to that last chapter, and God's like, shows up when he's good and ready to show up. But
Yeah.
secondly, he's like, I'm God. And sometimes that is going to have to just be enough for you. that
Yeah.
I that I am God. That is it. That I will always work for your good and my glory, always, but I'm God. So
Yeah.
how I do that and the way that I do that is in my hand, and you have to trust that, not expecting an answer from
Yeah.
him. So,
Yeah. That actually reminded me of a passage at my church. We had a sermon series on the vital signs of Christianity and faith, and one of the weeks we were talking about the family of Christ and about doubt, and about how the fact that is that we oftentimes lean into doubt when we don't understand it.
mm,
But the reality is that God is far beyond
mm,
our mere human understanding.
yep,
He is not at a human level.
no,
He is not something that we can even comprehend. But when we don't understand it and we don't know the answers, that's when we kind of swing to the doubt and the uncertainty, because we don't know the answers, right?
mm,
But there's a passage in Deuteronomy 29:29, and it's actually the screensaver on my phone, which says, "The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and to our children forever, that we may follow all the words of the law."
mm,
And as I was reflecting on that passage, I was like, actually, there are things that I am never going to understand about God. There are things that I am never going to know, and they are secret to God. But the things that He has revealed to me through my walk with him and my faith with
mm,
him, those are the things that I should cling to and hold to,
mm,
because they are revelations of his character and
mm,
who he is and his
mm,
faithfulness. And so when I am in moments of doubt, it's coming back to the truths that I know about God,
mm,
what he has shown me in my life. And in moments in my life, and we've journeyed through so many of those moments,
mhm,
um, where my world has been rocked and shaken, I have had the question of how can you still believe in God
Mm,
when this is happening? How can you believe in God when you're, you know, my parents were getting divorced and it was messy and
mm,
difficult when my dad was going into rehab. Like, how can you believe in God through all of these things? And it's, I have to go back to the truths that I know of him
mm,
because that's the unwavering, shakable thing and that shifts the doubt. But I think it's also accepting, like you said, I'm never going to have all the answers and
mm,
I'm not supposed to have all the
mhm.
answers
Yeah,
because if I had all the answers,
would need God.
I wouldn't need God.
Yeah. Yeah, it's what's that saying? When you can't see his hand, trust his heart.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. And I think what popped into my head as you were talking was a devotional we did at Seed the other day, which is a not for profit I work for, and one of the team members was sharing. He's had a bit to do with um, the stuff going on in the Ukraine, and is there's stuff going on in Sri Lanka. There's like the world is in some areas on its knees.
Yeah.
And it's really hard when you see that to trust and believe in a good God, a God who says he's all powerful, but yet there's
Mhm.
so much suffering and war and famine and lack in the world. Yet you're a good God, and the connection the parable here, or the story he shared with us from the Bible was when Jesus calms the storm, and
Mm.
he made the connection that um, that Jesus is similar to the ocean, that there's this real uncontrollable power about the ocean, and it can destroy and it can give life, but it can like wreak incredible havoc, and it's just wild. There is nothing really that kind of controls it, and yet it's subject to Jesus, which means like Jesus who created it has that within him as
Yeah.
well. um, and as we're reflecting on this, I said the one thing that stands out to me about drawing the comparison between the two, because I do agree there's this sense of like power to both,
Mhm.
is that um, the ocean does not have a heart in which it can control its power, but
Yeah.
Jesus has a heart that can control his power. And
Mm.
we can't see him at work, certainly in situations like the Ukraine and stuff. We can't see it. It's very hard to trust that God is at work in such a situation, but his heart that controls and wields and directs his power is the thing that we know we can trust. We can trust that
Mm.
while we can't see his hand, we can trust his heart, and that I think is applicable from large scale situations like we're experiencing globally, but also personal situations where you're like, I don't know how you're going to turn this around, Jesus, but I trust that you are working for my good and your glory.
Mhm.
So whether or not that takes years, I will wait. I will wait to see your goodness, because he
Yeah.
promises goodness to us, um, and and if we can wait, if we can trust his heart when we can't see his hands, then I believe we go on a journey of strengthening our faith, of growing us as
Mhm.
individuals, but also then waiting to see God's real goodness come into our lives. And then it's overwhelming. It's incredible the way
Yeah.
that he shows up, and you're like, I don't know how you did that, Jesus, but that was amazing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's kinda, and it goes back to your when you were on the train and you were reflecting back 7 years
Mm,
going, "Oh, I can see now
mm,
because my lens has shifted, the perspective has
yeah.
shifted," and I guess it's, again, the big picture. God has got a big picture. He's got a
Mm,
big plan that has been playing out for centuries,
mm,
generations, and we're only seeing this little bit of it,
yeah.
this little bit. Um, but on the big plan, it's a blip
Mm,
in time, um, and we're only seeing a small part of it, whereas he's seeing the big plan. And
yeah.
so it's holding true to he is in control,
Mm,
and although we don't understand, it goes back to trust as well, which we've spoken about so many times, just
mm,
trusting in his sovereignty,
mm,
and his perfect plan that is playing out. It's the
mm.
secret thing, and it's a secret thing that he's going to hold to himself. There are things that we're never going to understand and we'll be
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah. I think it's also, like, who are we?
Yeah.
to question God. I think that we can get quite, full of ourselves and think that we have more value and worth than what we do. We have value and worth because God ascribes us value and worth.
Yeah.
He says, "You are valuable to me. I'll die for you." Um, but we kind of can get a bit, I guess, cocky about it and be like, "Well, Jesus, I deserve answers. I deserve
Yeah.
a resolution right now. I deserve you to show up and do this." And it's like, I'm sorry, who are you again? Like, again,
Yeah.
it's that Job example. It's like, who are you? I'm God. Can you do this? No?
Yeah.
Okay. Then let's put the perspective into the right place and trust me and don't question, like, oh, sorry, not question, but um, don't get so full of a sense of self-worth
Yeah.
that you demand or assume that you are owed anything. It's by the grace of God we are given anything. And
Yeah.
so I think as well, those times of doubt and uncertainty are those training grounds. And we need to have a posture of humility in those
Mm.
training grounds and go, okay, this is really hard, Jesus, and I want it to change. I want this outcome and I want that. And he'll go,
Yeah.
yep, sure, tell me what you want. But then we need to release it and go, okay, Jesus, but I'm here to become more like you.
Yeah.
So show me through this season of doubt and uncertainty how to be more like you. Grow
Yeah.
me, change me, because I am not where I should be on my journey in becoming more like Christ. And this is an opportunity to do it. So I think our
Yeah.
attitude also in that environment is really important.
Because we naturally put caveats on things, right? We go,
Mm,
so God, I want you to fix this, but I want you to fix this in this way.
mm,
Or I want to see this happen, but if you could make it happen this way or at this time, that'd be really great. Thanks.
yep.
So it's this
Mm,
we put barriers or boundaries on God where and limits where God
mm,
is limitless, but also it shows our lack of trust and faith in him to do what is best and good for us
mm,
in his timing as well. Like I think that's the other thing sometimes, but it's a reflection of our humanity, right? It's
mm,
we are human beings.
mm,
And so there is this and it's a reflection of sin in the world
mm,
that we would even try to limit God and
mm,
put him in a box and say,
mm,
this is what I want you to do, because that's not who our God is. And if that is who our God was, then what would be the point?
mm. The thought I had as you were talking was that in our real human view of things, we tell God how we want things to play out, but we actually miss some really wonderful things that can unfold because we go through that valley, that journey of doubt. I
Yeah.
reflect on so obviously that relationship ended 7-8 years ago, and I have been single for that whole time up until about 6 months ago. And that was a real difficult time. There was a lot of um, disappointment with God, doubts with God, angry, frustrated. But there was also moments of learning about myself and discovering
Mm.
who I am, and actually kind of being in a relationship with myself.
Mhm.
And I remember having this thought as I came into my 30s. I'd just become single before my 30th birthday, and I thought, okay, God, if you have me single coming into my 30s, which when I was 16 I thought would be a fate worse than death.
Yeah.
Yes, I wrote that in my journals. Then I was like, if I'm 30, coming into my 30s single, then I need to find out what you have for me here. What is it that you want me to learn and to experience and to understand in this? Because this is not my plan. This is
Mhm.
not how I wanted it to play out. And I worry that you don't have the power you say you do to actually bring things into my life that I'm asking you for. But all
Mhm.
right, I'll go on the journey. And through that 7 years, as I said, I was in essentially a relationship with myself. There's so much that I grew and changed in and came to know more about myself, what I wanted out of life. It refined what I was looking for in a partner massively. And one of the biggest things that came out of that was my very first book. If I
Yeah.
hadn't been single for 7 years, there was no way I was going to write a book about singleness. And that was
Yeah.
my very first book. And the way that I have seen people engage with that book and the way that it has blessed people, it has connected with people, it has helped them see God more in their singleness. I'm like, I couldn't have planned any of that. And there's no way I could have written anything as connecting as that if I hadn't gone through that singleness season filled with all of its doubt and uncertainty, um, and delivered a product or something that actually is serving people. So
Yeah.
I think, you know, if we don't have the right attitude of like coming into these seasons where it could be long, short, who knows? I certainly wanted it to be less than 7 years, but Jesus had other plans, and that's okay. If we can enter whatever season, whatever length of time that is, and go, all right, Jesus, what do you have for me here? It's not my plan. And I've told you my plan, and you're obviously not on board with that one. So
Yeah.
what is it that you have for me here? What is it that I need to change and grow in, and show me how that will be a blessing to
Yeah.
others around me. And if we can learn to kind of embrace those seasons,
Yeah.
I think that there's some really beautiful things that Jesus can do in our lives,
Yeah.
and really beautiful ways that he can take what we feel is dust and dirt and make something beautiful out of it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's flip the switch. When you were in those moments of doubt
Mm,
and uncertainty and you were going, God, I don't know that I trust you here. I don't know that you've got the best plan for me. I don't know. Like, I know for me, and I've spoken about this many times on the podcast, my shower is my place of communion with God. It
mm,
is my place of fighting and wrestling with God. It is my place of screaming at Him
mhm,
sometimes. But it is also it's the place where I do the work with
mm,
God. And there have been many times where I have been on the floor in the shower going, God, like why? And I don't know. And this is not what I had planned. And I don't know that I don't know that you're for me.
mm,
I don't know that you're for me. I don't know that this is
mm,
for me. This is I don't know that I have the strength to do this anymore
mm.
and to walk this path. In hindsight, I can see all of the amazing things that came out of that season, right?
Yeah.
But in that moment where I just it's etched in my brain forever. That
Mm,
moment where I was on the ground in my shower and I was like, nah,
mm,
nah, I'm out. I like,
mm,
I'm out, God.
mhm,
In that moment, and I know that there are people probably who are listening to this who probably have had similar moments or maybe going through a moment like that now. What would be your encouragement to somebody in that moment to because it's overwhelming?
mm. Yep. My So the story that comes to my mind is only happened around this time last year, where um, through like that singleness, there was plenty of times where like I was fine and I was like trusting it's going to be okay. God's got a plan. Just, keep active, keep meeting people, but trust that God's going to bring the person in. And then there would be moments, and they would start as a day where I just didn't feel the best and wasn't so hopeful. And sometimes it would just be a day, and then other times it would last for weeks. And I would be essentially in a depressed state of like for a week or so or 2 weeks. And I remember I was in quite a deep one last year around this time. And I, I did a few things. The first was I took it to a trusted friend, and I just cried and cried and cried to her and said, this is what I'm feeling. And I'm not necessarily because I think she was going to tell me anything brand new about God. She was just going to tell me what I already knew and to trust him and
Mhm.
he's got a plan and all those things. But she just lovingly sat with me and just affirmed, yep, it is hard. Yes,
Yeah.
that does suck. Yes, I can imagine it's really difficult in that moment or when that happens. And that was really helpful. So um, I would say take it to a trusted friend or pastor or someone who um, isn't going to turn around and try and fix you.
Mm.
not their job to fix you.
Mm.
And you don't need fixing either.
No.
It's okay that you're in
No.
that space of like, I'm really down and I'm really struggling
Mm.
and I just don't see God in this at all. You don't need fixing. You're just human. It's very
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah.
So choose wisely. Choose very, very, very wisely about who you take things to. Your heart is worth protecting, and
Yeah.
not everyone gets access to speak into it or into your life. So that's the first one. And then the second one during
Wait a
that time.
second. Can you repeat that line again? Because I feel like that's a word.
I said, not everyone gets access to your heart. Your heart is worth protecting. So don't just let anyone speak into it. Don't just let anyone have a say over that area.
Mhm.
It should only be people who have journeyed with you for quite some time, not a new connection or a new friend. You are so worth protecting. That heart is so worth protecting that people should earn access to it, and even then, only a few. Um, so, yeah.
For those, there's somebody out there that needed to hear that, so that's why I wanted you to repeat it. Okay, can continue.
Yeah. No worries. I pray it blesses them. And then the second thing during that time, I remember vividly, it was the morning um, of my birthday celebration. So it wasn't actually my birthday. My birthday was like, I think a week later, but I was having some, like a picnic in the park in the afternoon with some friends that morning. And, sorry, that afternoon. And that morning I was in the shower and I was very, very low. And I sat down and I just cried and cried and cried and, quietly screamed at God and was very, very in a very dark place over being single and turning 37 and like, come on, God, have I not been faithful? Have I not shown up? Have I not done all that you've asked me to? All I want is a husband. And I know that no relationship, you go through that. I know no relationship is perfect, but I want a husband, blah, 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 blah. And I was just going over and over and over that. And I just let it. I just was like, not holding this back. I'm just going to get this out. And then at one point, it subsided and I just stopped and I got out of the shower and I got dressed and I ate some food and I went about my day. And the point I make about that is taking care of yourself is really important. So
Mm.
have your moments of being angry and upset with God and let them come and let them be what they are. But then get up and do the regular normal things like have a shower, put
Yeah.
some clothes on, eat some food, and take care of you. Do the things that actually look after you. A lot of my God time is by the ocean. I spend time down there. I could sit down there for hours, and there were times over that period where, I would take my journal down, and for hours I would just sit and listen to worship music and watch the waves roll in. That's all I
Mhm.
would do. But that time was really, I wasn't coming to ask God for answers because I know that he wasn't about to snap his fingers and make a man appear in front of
Yeah.
me and, have a lifeguard run down the beach or something like that and be like, oh my gosh, it was this like amazing meeting and wow. I knew that that wasn't going to happen,
Yeah.
mainly because there's no lifeguards at the beach that I was going to. But what I did do in those moments was just sit and reflect on the goodness of God. And so
Yeah.
that dovetails into the third point. So the second one being look after you, do some things that make you happy and smile
Yeah.
and stuff that brings you joy, makes your heart a little lighter, do those things. And then thirdly, it would be to reflect on what we know to be true of God.
Mm.
And that's his goodness and his kindness. And, he's shown up for
Yeah.
us all in different ways in the past. Why would he not show up for you? Like there is story after story, not just in the Bible, but
Yeah.
globally. You talk to any Christian, they will have a story of like, Jesus showed up for me in this way. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, look at his goodness. And so just sitting and going, I don't understand it, but I trust you, God, and I trust you know what you're doing. I'll just sit with this
Yeah.
and I'll just carry it. And it's heavy today, but that's all right. I'm not expecting you to answer the question. I just want to remember that you are good, that you are a
Yeah.
good, good father.
Yeah.
And so those were the things that certainly helped me over the last few years in carrying a season of doubt and uncertainty. I did not want to be in it. And, I can certainly attest now to his goodness
Yeah.
and the importance of waiting for his goodness,
Yeah.
the importance of like holding steadfast and waiting for God to bring in his answer
Yeah.
rather than rushing at something or trying to make something happen or pushing and pushing and pushing, but rather like hold steadfast and
Yeah.
wait for God to show up because he will. He never
Yeah.
has failed us in that way. He's always shown up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Sometimes it's suddenly,
mm,
sometimes it takes some time. I think the other point that I would add to that is to keep talking to him.
mm,
I think, and to keep doing, if it is the questioning and the yelling and the screaming and as you said, you get it out,
mm,
because if anybody is a safe place, God is our safe place
yeah,
to get it all out. And it's nothing that he hasn't heard before. And
mm,
it's nothing that he doesn't already know, because he knows the thoughts that are in our heads. He knows the desires of our heart.
mm,
He knows,
mm,
but he also, everything, he concerns himself with us.
mm,
Um, and so everything about him is concerned with us.
mm,
So going to him and continuing to wrestle with him and continuing to talk to him and pray with him, even when we don't have words to say
mm,
that are eloquent
mm,
or that sound like they should, or we've been told they should, but just coming and being with him like you did. You went to the ocean because that's your place of being with God.
mm,
Um, yeah, those would be my encouragements too. But also, as you said, to let people walk the journey with you. You're not alone in this. And I think that's the point of this conversation, is that everybody has doubts and you're not alone.
mm,
And this is not a journey you have to walk alone.
mm. Yeah.
And you're never alone because God is with you, but you also have brothers and sisters in Christ. You have,
Mm,
community around you that are there to walk with you. And like your friend did, even just sit with you and say, yeah, it sucks.
mm, yeah. Because the truth is, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
It always does.
Boom. It always does.
Mm.
Neri, as always, I love chatting to you, my friend, and I love that we get to record it and we get to let other people be a part of the conversation when we chat. But I also love hearing how God works through your life. Like, I certainly see it, but I get excited when friends reflect on their own life and they can see God moving the pieces.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love our chats, and I hope that so many people have been encouraged by hearing how God moved the pieces for your life
Mm.
and
Yeah.
showed up in so many different ways.
Mm.